Snapped. I didn't cut it. This one is toast.
So in our last episode, where we left you guys off, was this vehicle being dragged into the garage via the tow truck after it decided to yeet its suspension to pieces. And that's pretty much where we pick up on this episode.
All right, so we're going to tear straight into this thing. We're actually going to start by taking off the upper ball joint, just the nut for now. I went at it with a wrench and then quickly decided that using the power ratchet would actually be a little bit faster. It probably would have been a good idea to hit it with some WD-40. I did have to zip it back on and off a couple times before it came off. But once it was off, I was able to move on to the next thing. The next thing being the outer tie rod. Outer tie rod, yeah. I ended up having to use a deep socket, and I went straight into using the 3/8 impact gun. Again, tried to do it dry, realizing that maybe a little bit of lubrication would go a long way, and that's what actually ended up making this job pretty easy. With the nut off the tie rod, a few quick taps of the hammer breaks it free so that it can come out of the spindle. Remember, the spindle is going to have to come completely off the vehicle, so everything has to come off anyways. And we don't have to be careful about damaging any threads, since there's a lot of material beyond the threads on the actual tie rod itself. Now, the upper tie rod the upper ball joint was giving me a little bit of trouble, since it would not... I'm guessing just simply because of the age of the vehicle. I mean, this thing is over 15 years old. 2007. Yeah. Since it's over 15 years old, maybe the pin for the actual ball joint itself is just seized in the spindle, and tapping it, jiggling it, it was not coming out. I used a wood clamp in the push position to even try raising the upper control arm and spindle off of where it was resting, and this thing was just not breaking free. I eventually gave up on trying to get the upper ball joint out and moved on to disassembling the rest of the spindle. So we'll cut to that right now. Again, yet another attempt to try taking off any of this possibly oxidized or corroded hardware completely dry. I actually did try, I actually did go straight to the WD-40. Okay, so I actually did go ahead and actually hit as much as I could of the area with WD-40 to try and see if I could get the axle nut to ease up. Surprisingly, once the WD-40 was applied, I was kind of surprised how little effort it took for the nut to come off. So I don't know if maybe part of it is the torque and part of it is just the corrosion and rust that builds up. The thing I'm doing right now with the screwdriver, I want to thank South Main Auto Repair. When I actually looked up how they did this job, it's exactly how he did it. He stuck a screwdriver through the brake caliper into the brake disc itself to help apply, basically to help torque or to keep the brake itself, that hub from turning. And I think it's genius. So I have zero issues with it. Don't know if anybody approves or disapproves of it, but don't really care. It helped my job. Here's where I run into my problem with the sheer fact that all the hardware on this thing has never been touched before. So the bolts that I'm working on right now, these are the bolts for the caliper. I am not removing the caliper from the caliper bracket. I'm taking the entire assembly off of the spindle, and I'm having to go straight to the actual torque wrench, pretty much. So once this is off, this is what's going to allow you to remove the brake assembly entirely and the caliper, which all has to come off, since we're going to take the spindle over to the actual bench to remove the remains of the lower ball joint once we get the upper ball joint to come off. Okay, what I'm doing now is extremely important. Anytime you remove your brake caliper, you need to support its weight, either like I'm doing on zip ties or on a bungee cord, something, so that you don't allow the caliper itself to put any weight on the brake hose. That is something you don't want to do. It could damage the brake hose and leave you without brakes, God forbid. So unfortunately, there was no way around it. I had to go brute force on this thing. There was nothing allowing... I don't know what was holding this thing in place. I've had this issue happen to me on another car. The only thing holding that tie rod in, or not tie rod, I'm sorry, the ball joint into the hole it's sitting in, is friction and oxidation or corrosion. There's no nut on the bottom. This thing is in there from sheer pressure. So unfortunately, you guys won't get to enjoy the satisfaction of seeing it finally come off. The camera battery, well, or technically the phone I'm recording on, the battery runs out about a minute short of me actually getting this thing off, and I literally had to just hammer away at it for a good while in order to get it off.
All right, so here's where we're at. Took a little break, got some lunch. Okay, so right now we've got this. This is the hub. So right now it's actually upside down. This is the lower ball joint. See there where it's covered. So this, I don't know if this is the speed sensor cable that's attached to the hub bearing, but anyways, that cable is attached to that, and I don't want to take it off the hub. And that is running. That runs all the way up. So that runs up here onto this brake hose. Has a bunch of connectors there, and then it goes up and around this actual bump stop, and then it goes up into the engine bay. And where you're gonna disconnect it from is right here. This is the ABS pump and everything, and that's where you're gonna disconnect it from. It actually comes to the side. You're gonna have to remove the battery tray. And that's where you're going to disconnect it. By disconnecting that, it's like off. So, by disconnecting that, that allows you to take this whole thing out, and then take this to the bench so we can work on it. Alright, now I'm going to channel my inner Anstead from Wheeler Dealers for this one. So, this is the spindle, I think. Yeah, and then this is the hub. Anyway, so the bit that we're interested in, what I really want to do is I want to remove this in as entire and in as whole a piece as possible, so that we can actually get a nice look at it.
So here's basically what you're using this for. It is a pulling sort of device. That's what the cups are different for. Because you're pushing the ball joint from the bottom up, the cup on top gives the ball joint a cavity to move into. The weird part is that in order to perform this service, especially in this kind of setup where the ball joint is independent of the control arm, it's basically its own part, it does require this tool. And in my case, I just didn't have the power in my little 3/8 impact gun. Had I had a 1/2 inch, maybe I could have done it in one shot rather than in stages. Also, what could help you moving forward is if you get the expansion kit, which offers slightly more sizes, more diameters that can fit different variations of the same parts, and definitely a 1/2 inch impact gun will speed the process through. You won't go through so much trial and tribulation like I did, but it's a pretty cool tool, and it makes what would otherwise be an impossible job relatively straightforward. And there you can see the offending part. And keep in mind, this thing is actually listed as a recall. Like, this is an accepted known failure of this component. But from my understanding, it's supposed to be the socket, not the shaft, that actually severs. And here you go. Here's a shot of after we pulled the bottom part out of the control arm. You can see that the two faces line up, but the faces of the pieces that tore, they're not flush, which means that this thing was already misshapen by the time it broke. So who knows how many miles I drove with it damaged like that. So anyways, the next phase is to get this thing ready and put in the new ball joint. Okay, now with the ball joint removed, what you're supposed to do is clean the mating surfaces on the inner passage where the ball joint actually sits, and then you want to clean the top side where the actual lip of the housing for the ball joint will actually sit. You can use sandpaper here. I'm using a metal brush. I actually use a little bit of sandpaper to get rid of some of the bigger buildup of corrosion in preparation to put in the new ball joint, because it's supposed to help it pass in. It's supposed to help the mating surfaces seat, because this is not something you want coming out, because if it did come out, it would cause the same issue as fracturing. Cleaned, hit it one more time with WD-40 and dry up all the WD-40 to make sure that I have a dry surface. Full disclosure, the ball joint that you guys see me installing right now is not the one that actually ends up remaining on the car. Unfortunately, either by pure happenstance, I'm putting it down to not having all of the cup sizes available. I only had one that was that length on the bottom. When I put it on, I began the process of actually pulling the ball joint in. You can see it coming down a little bit, but for whatever reason, I ran out of torque, felt that I needed to switch cups, try different things. I actually loosened the clamp up and then retightened it with other cups. This is all a work in progress. I've never used this tool before. In doing that, you'll see it when I actually switch now to the original way that I was meant to do it. When I put the new cup on for the ball joint to go down, that cup actually ended up pinching the dust cover, and as it finally pulled the ball joint nearly all the way through, you'll see in about a second when I actually realize exactly what just happened. So it doesn't take me long to realize I made a huge mistake, and I try to figure. You'll realize it when I realize it. You'll see. There we go. So unfortunately, I'm sitting here going, man, what can I do? Is there any way to salvage this? It's completely split open. It looks like somebody took a razor to it. No one sells these dust covers, which means, unfortunately, this one has to get cut off and replaced. So that was a bit of a setback. But not to worry, nothing that a little persuasion with a metal disc can't take care of. Yes, I did move the can of highly flammable lubricant from the path of the shower of sparks. And while I should have actually just put a brand new disc on to begin with, I really tried to get every last little bit I could out of the disc that was left. Once I had cut it to pieces enough with a little bit more persuasion from the hammer, it finally did come off, trying to take out the camera in the process. So moving on. You know what? I think we'll go ahead and skip this part since it's just a repeat of what I did taking the bad one off, and we'll skip ahead to the solution I came up with for installing the new one. Alright, so the solution was pretty simple. There's a spring ring that actually locks the boot onto the cup of the ball joint itself. Once you pop the ring off, and it is something that can be put back on fairly easily, once you pop it off, you can pull the whole boot off, and the cups that you use on the ball joint separator installer are large enough that that metal part that I'm holding with my left hand, the gloved hand, that will fit inside the cup, which means that as the two pieces compress and push the ball joint into place, the cup won't be the edge of the ball joint won't be stopped by the cup of the actual press that's installing it. Once the ball joint is in, I can simply put the boot back on, put back on the spring clip, and that way everything remains sealed and clean. That was the important part that I screwed up the first time around.
Now, put this on, flush, we can put the boot back on. Completely undamaged. Probably could have done it the other way.
So the next thing we've got to replace is, as I mentioned here, that thing has no resistance left in it. So what we're going to be replacing is the upper control arm. The upper control arm is obviously going to have the upper ball joint in place. So for us to do that, we've got to get the bolt in the back and the bolt in the front off. Those are supposed to be accessible from under the hood. So there is number one. That one's going to be fairly easy to get to. No real trouble there. Okay, I can see the tab moving. I think the tab is stopped. There we go. Now we can attach it. This way may simply be the easier option. I'm gonna see if that's enough. So for this one, it's out!
Now that it's out, let's take a quick look at it at the bench.
This is what good, strong ball joint looks like. Very stiff. This, limp, flaccid. This is a no good.
It's like a limp. It's not good.
This is
Hard
actually...
is better.
It works out that we're replacing the whole thing, since there really is no way to service this part. So let me show you guys what the new piece looks like. Here, underneath, and that's to protect the actual ball joint itself. New bushings on the control arm. This is going in. There we go. So it took a little bit of finesse to get it in. There we go. So we'll do the front one first, and then I can go and try and feed the back one through as well. First bolt is through, so now we just got to do the other one back there, which will probably be the difficult one. All right. There we go. It is starting on just fine. Perfect. All right. So with that, now we've got this on, this bolt on. What I'm gonna do now is snug them up. We're not gonna torque them down because these have to be torqued with under tension.
How do you know when to stop?
It's clicking. I have it set to 60 pounds, but I needed to get this cotter pin in because in addition to the torque, this helps prevent the nut from rotating loose. So right now I'm kind of over torquing it. So with the wheel speed sensor, ABS sensor put away, I temporarily mount the brake caliper. Yes, I know the brake rotor is not there. I temporarily mounted it so that I can actually jack the vehicle up by the A-arm, specifically to put everything under tension so I can torque the bolts on the upper control arm. And that's what I'm going to switch over to now so that you guys can have a good view of that. So similarly with the removal, the one in the front is actually pretty easy because you really do have full access to it, and that tab that's on the back of the bolt kind of holds it in place. It's the one in the back that really makes you question who it was that designed this entire layout. So I tried to go for the same angle that I did the last time when I was able to capture the nut of this bolt through some passage in this entire mess of everything. Unfortunately, all you guys are going to hear is the clicking of the torque wrench as I torque the bolt down once the job is finished. Now we can put the tie rod on the final time. We're in the home stretch now of the driver's side, at least, as I'm taking off the caliper just to make sure I put the rotor back on. This entire time I never took the pads out of the caliper, but I did have the inside pad fall out. So I'm going to slide everything back on. I didn't push the piston in the caliper so that I wouldn't affect any of the metering or anything for the brakes. So I'm just trying to gently snug it back on. Everything will loosen up once I actually get the thing mounted. So it's pretty clear by now, you guys should see it, that I actually didn't replace the brake pads on it. At this moment, I just couldn't get my hands on them. So that is the very next thing we're going to do, which replacing the brake pads on this thing is very, very straightforward. So that's why I just focused this job on doing the actual ball joints themselves. And again, just like I mentioned at the beginning when I took this thing off, I saw this trick from South Main Auto Repair. Just stick a screwdriver through the gap between the bracket and the caliper itself. That'll hold the into the rotor. That'll hold the whole hub in place, and then you can torque everything down. Surprisingly, I'm not sure if I expected it to be much higher, but the torque on this axle nut is only about 100 foot-pounds. I don't know if that's high, if that's low. It's just not what I expected it to be. Not sure why, but yeah, 100 foot-pounds to torque down the axle nut. And from there, it was pretty much just, you know, like if you were putting a tire back on. Well, now it's time to do the infinitely easier passenger side, and I think I'm going to finish this up real quick and we'll wrap up the video. I know I technically did say that we were done for this, but I did want to show you guys this. Well, I actually ended up having to take off the entire passenger side hub. Now, I wanted to show you guys this with it on the actual... And we're back with Crooked Mustache reporting here on failures in American manufacturing. This is what your ball joint looks like after 150,000 miles. It's not supposed to move like that, nor should it move inside of its own hole. It should be stiff, proud, erect. That's supposed to be round. This was not even the side that failed. I almost considered putting this off. Almost. So apparently this is actually a recall on all Jeep Liberties. Dude, look at that. It's... Forget like I don't know, but I've never seen a ball and socket joint that is telescoping. And the scary part is the other one, because I have it here. Look, this is where the other one failed. The other one snapped. I didn't cut it. This one is toast.
And so that brings us to the end of another video. Now, I wasn't kidding. I actually did at one point contemplate not doing the passenger side, and I'm really glad that we went ahead and did both sides, so that's one less thing I have to worry about. Brake pads will be the next thing on this thing, because that's one thing we just can't get around. That's not really a failure. That's just simply wear and tear. No big deal. Hopefully, this thing decides to stop breaking down on me. Who knows? Shark bait is kind of almost a staple of this channel at this point, because he never fails to fail. One way or another, something is bound to break on this. Maybe because it's a Jeep, who knows? But anyways, guys, if you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up, subscribe, and don't forget to hit the notification bell so you don't miss any of our upcoming future videos. We're going to be continuing on with DIY stuff here on the cars, both on shark bait and on the other cars, as well as DIY projects, and more reviews are coming. Thank you guys again so much for watching. I appreciate it. For Crooked Mustache, I'm Alfred. We'll see you next time. Dale.